Hey guys, what's going on? Ghost Dragon 1182 here, back for another coffee talk. And in this one, we're going to talk about Dead Space because it's the month of October and I want to talk about some horror games. So, what better place to start than with one of my favorites? This isn't going to be a review or anything, this is just going to be like a look back upon my experience with the game and possibly where I hope the franchise goes from here. I remember when Dead Space came out. I picked it up for the PlayStation 3 and I went home and I played it. At the time, I was working afternoons, so I was getting off work at like 12, coming home at night and sitting down and playing games. So, playing this late at night really, I'm sure, lent itself to the atmosphere that this game was. And there's the opening cutscene. You're approaching Yoshimura, and they crash, and then it starts. It's got a little bit of a slow burn because you spend a little bit of time getting your bearings for a minute, and then oh hell breaks loose. And I remember, man, when that those necromorphs come out of the vents, and Zach Hammond's like, "Just run, Isaac, run!" I was like, "Fuck yeah!" And I ran as fast as you could make Isaac run in the beginning of the game there through all that shit because I was like, "Fuck this! I ain't sticking around to see what's going on. I'm getting the hell out of Dodge." And I'd never, at least at that point, I'd never experienced a game where I actually generally kind of like, I don't want to say like I was afraid, but like you kind of felt that tension and that fear. I was like, holy fuck, I gotta get the hell out of here before he's killed. And there was a level of tension in the game. The game, the first time you play the game, the best way I can describe it is like it's edgy because you never know when something's gonna come out of the vents or one of the corpses is gonna rise up. And I probably could have, the first time I played the game, I probably could have beat it a lot faster than I did. But I spent a good majority of the game stomping every corpse I came across in a hallway, just so it wouldn't possibly turn into a necromorph later on if I had to backtrack through there. And this was a game too. The first time you played it, it really fucked. It kind of fucked with your standard shooter convention because while it had very heavy shooter elements to it, it your instinct when you play a game like this is to aim for the head, and if you shot these things in the head, all it did was kind of piss them off. So it was having that dismember mechanic was so different than what you were used to. You played Resident Evil, that was your thing. You shot them in the head. Whereas this, like I said, if you shot them in the head, you were in for a bad time because they just went berserk. So being able, like, at first shooting their arms off and then learning that, hey, I can conserve ammo if I blast their legs off and then run up to them and stomp them a couple times, was just kind of it was a neat and sort of refreshing game mechanic that they implemented. But one of my favorite segments in the whole game, and it was done really well, maybe a little overused in the sequels because they did it again, but the segment with the hunter in the first game was so tense because you had this thing that you couldn't kill and it was stalking you through two different chapters. I think chapter 5 was the first time it pops up, and then chapter 10 maybe, I can't remember, but it's a couple chapters later it comes after you again, and like really the only thing you can do is just you can dismember it, freeze it with stasis after you dismember all of its limbs, and then just hope you make some progress. And you get up on the higher difficulties, and that encounter is just probably one of the most stressful things I ever experienced in a video game, but it's so good. And they rehashed that in the second one with the Ubermorph, and then they had the regenerators in the second game, or the third game. The regenerators was just kind of like overkill. It felt more of like a pain in the ass than the kind of feeling you had in the first game. Where the first game, that whole situation with the hunter very much reminded me of Alien. Not so much, I mean, obviously they weren't dismembering the alien and it was regenerating, but just that having something hunt you actively that you couldn't stop. And at the time, really, the first Dead Space was the best Aliens game that was never made. Because it had that same tension. It had like that retro futuristic look with like you had sci-fi and stuff like that, but it was kind of scummy. It wasn't like this pristine 2001 Space Odyssey type of sci-fi. It was gritty and things were dirty and rusted out and malfunctioning, and I mean, yeah, I mean a lot of that was for story purposes and things of that nature. And you kind of Isaac kind of felt like he was a errand boy, but that game had so much tension the first time you played it, and just the way the sound design was done, and how the environmental effects worked. It wasn't a game that you played where you relaxed. You were always waiting for that next moment where something was going to pop out or something was going to stand up. And it's kind of like what Alien Isolation did. It wasn't the moments where you did have enemy encounters that were horrifying and putting you on edge. It was leading up to those moments that
Isaac, I've patched
was where the terror came in, not knowing what was around the next corner. And they did it so well. And I did like the second game, but that first game was just, they had all their ducks in a row, and they just knocked it out of the park. And they tried, I think, to build on the formula that they laid with that first game, and ultimately they kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say it was a push from EA. It could have very well been EA that pushed them into it, but you know, the second game had a little bit more action, the third game had more action, so they were trying to draw in other people. So I really, really hope if they do end up making a fourth game, they go back to that more atmospheric tension that they had in the first game, because it was just done so well. And at the time, there wasn't really anything else that was like that. You know, Resident Evil had started going in kind of a more action-y direction with Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5. Silent Hill was kind of oh, the hell was that one? Homecoming was kind of a dud. So I mean, there wasn't anything, at least on the console front, that had this kind of gameplay where it was just like a straight-up horror game. And for me, this was a game that when I finished it, I immediately wanted to play it again. And not too many games did that. There just wasn't anything that really grabbed me at the time like that. And for me, that was rare. I mean, there's games that I immediately wanted to play again after I played them, but this was one that once I was done with it, I was like, I have to go through that again. That was just, it provided me with an experience as a horror fan, especially, that had been lacking in recent years. I mean, like, the first three Resident Evil games, they were creepy and kind of, there was some tension there, especially with Resident Evil 3 having the Nemesis hunt you, but there wasn't anything with this level of graphic fidelity that engaged you the way this game did at the time. Or at least nothing that I had played at the time. You know, and eventually we got games like Amnesia and Outlast and Alien Isolation, where the games are arguably more scarier and there is more tension involved in those games. But this was, for me, one of the first ones. And it set a really high bar for the series that I think it still hasn't quite met with the releases that came out afterwards. And I did like Dead Space 2, but nothing will trump this first game for me unless they really hit all the right bullet points with a fourth game and just grand slam it. I mean, because that's what the series needs. Hopefully they don't let too much outside interference knock them off their path. I would really like to see Visceral just kind of go back to the roots of the Dead Space series and make a game that's truly frightening again. And Isaac doesn't even have to be the protagonist, you know. I mean, there's other stories that can be told in this universe. They've done, I feel like with Dead Space 3, Isaac's story is, there's really nowhere else to go from it. I mean, how many times can you drag the poor guy through these situations? And, you know, it's kind of like the Alien thing. You don't always, you know, all these Alien movies, they always have to have Ellen Ripley, and you don't need to have Ellen Ripley in every Alien movie, but It's kind of how I feel with Dead Space. Now that we've had these 3 games with Isaac, I feel like his character has made a complete arc, and having another game with him would just kind of feel forced. They could start a new trilogy with a new protagonist and go from there. I mean, they could even, hell, there's stories that could be told even with, you know, with the Michael Altman situation when he had his whole encounter with. Now, I didn't read the novel, but that's kind of where it all started. I mean, there's a history here with the markers and the human race, and there's places they can go with it outside of the realm of just having Isaac be the central character. So we'll see. You know, we'll see. I don't expect to hear anything about a new game anytime soon. I don't expect to. If anything, I see rumors pointing at like 2017. That's a long ways off, but I would very much like to see another Dead Space game. You know, again, who knows if that'll happen. But I do plan on replaying the first one. I'd like to go through the entire trilogy. Figure since it's October, it's appropriate. But, you know, I'm going to make a few more Coffee Talk videos discussing different horror games that I really, really enjoyed. Maybe some that I didn't really enjoy, too. But it's appropriate. I love horror. I love Halloween. And I am an avid video game fan, so it just kind of made sense to kind of roll some of these out for this month. So, what was some of your favorite horror games? Or games I should check out, or yeah, anything like that. That's what these are about. This is like a discussion, or it's a means to start a discussion. So let me know in the comments below. And like always, guys, I want to thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.